What if your biggest enemy wasn't out there, but inside your own mind? What if the most painful betrayals you've ever felt were the ones you unconsciously committed against yourself? You might not remember the moment it began. Maybe you were young, too young to fight back, too young to speak up. So you learned to shrink. You learned to stay quiet. You learned that safety meant pretending, pleasing, and punishing yourself first before anyone else could. You didn't become weak. You became your own protector. And in the process, you turned your mind into a battlefield. You hear it now, don't you? That quiet voice that cuts through you like a whisper made of glass. You'll never be enough. Why bother? Don't try. Don't trust. Don't feel. You think it's you, but it's not. It's an old echo, a survival instinct that's outlived its use. And tonight, I want to help you see it. This is not a video about Carl Jung. This is about the version of you that Carl Jung would say was lost, buried, and exiled. The version you've been looking for in relationships that break you, in habits that numb you, in lives that never quite feel like your own. This isn't going to be a lecture. No listicles. No fancy quotes. This is a mirror. I'm just holding it up to you. You'll know when it's time to look. Because if you've been sabotaging your peace, if you've been quietly burning down the bridges you so desperately want to cross, it's not because you're broken. It's because no one taught you how to listen to the parts of you that hurt without handing them the wheel. So stay, just for a little while longer. You might find the war inside you doesn't need a winner. It needs a witness. And if this reaches you in that space where words feel heavier than silence, I invite you to take a breath, sit with me, and let this story move through you. If this already feels like something that's touching something real inside, you subscribe, like, or share this moment. Not for me, but so someone else like you doesn't keep walking through their life without knowing they were never alone in it. It usually starts on a day that looks like any other. The world moves normally. People pass by. Nothing explodes, but something small shifts. And you begin to feel like you can't quite breathe inside your own skin. You'll open your eyes, brush your teeth, make your coffee. You'll even smile when someone says good morning. But inside, there's a quiet ache. Not loud enough to call pain, but too deep to ignore. That's the day self-sabotage wears its softest mask. It doesn't show up shouting. It shows up as hesitation, as that moment right before you say something real and you choose silence instead, as the apology you give for simply existing, as the slow withdrawal from what you once loved. And the truth is, no one sees it happening. They only see the consequences, the missed opportunities, the chaos, the patterns, the constant, almost. But what they don't see is the child inside, crouched behind walls of your own making, convinced the world will leave again if you ever stand in your full truth. It's not that you want to fail. It's that failing feels safer than being exposed. Because if you really try, and it still falls apart, that confirms your deepest fear, that you were never enough to begin with. So instead, you break the thing before anyone else can. You walk away. You say you're not ready. You ghost the good. You overstay in the bad. You become so familiar with the ache that peace feels like a stranger you don't know how to trust. And then you wonder why nothing ever lasts. You tell yourself, I ruin everything. But that's not true, is it? You don't ruin everything. You've just never been taught how to hold something beautiful without fearing its loss. You don't destroy joy. You just brace for the fall before joy can even land. Somewhere, a long time ago, you made a decision. Not with words, but with your heart. You said, if I stay small, I won't be abandoned again. You said, if I expect disappointment, I won't be blindsided. You said, if I never ask, I'll never be rejected. And now those decisions live in your mind like gospel. You confuse them with instinct. But they are not truth. They are trauma in disguise. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You've called it fate for too long. But what if it wasn't fate? What if it was just pain, dressed in your voice? The moment you begin to notice, really notice, how you speak to yourself, how you shrink before you shine, how you pull away when love gets close. That is the moment the mirror cracks open. And through the shards, you don't just see your flaws. You see the parts of you that were never flawed to begin with. Just wounded, just tired, just waiting for you to come home to them. Not to judge them, not to fix them, but to say, I see you, and I'm not leaving you this time. Because the truth is, the mind does not need to be mastered like a beast. It needs to be held like a child who's cried alone for too many years. Sometimes healing doesn't look like light. Sometimes it looks like sitting in the dark without trying to escape. You've spent years trying to escape, haven't you? Through perfection, through performance, through pretending to be okay when you were anything but. But here's what no one told you. Mastering your mind doesn't mean silencing every fear or erasing every shadow. It means becoming the one who stays with yourself when the darkness rises. Not fighting it, not fixing it, but staying. There's a part of you that remembers everything. Not the memories you post, not the highlight reels, but the quiet ones. Like the time you reached for comfort and found absence, the time you told the truth and were punished for it, the time you loved deeply and were left anyway. These are the moments that built your inner world. You think you forgot them, but they never forgot you. They built the walls around your heart. They carved the cracks in your self-trust. They whispered stories so many times you stopped questioning them. I must be too much. I must not be worth the effort. I must need to earn every bit of love I get. And so you tried. You tried so hard. You became the one who fixes, who gives, who holds space for everyone but herself. You became the reliable one, the strong one, the emotionally intelligent one. But in that process, you disappeared. Not because you were weak, but because you believed survival required sacrifice, and so you sacrificed yourself. And here's the paradox: your mind, in trying to protect you, turned you into your own jailer. That's the twisted beauty of self-sabotage. It's never random. It's patterned, precise. A defense mechanism that once saved you, now strangles you. But here's where something begins to shift. When you pause not to criticize yourself, but to wonder, why do I shut down when someone gets close? Why do I chase love that feels just out of reach? Why do I feel guilty when things are finally calm? You start to see the invisible strings. You start to hear the original voice behind the inner critic. And when you ask, who taught me this? The whole room goes quiet. Because it's never really your voice. It's inherited. It's conditioned. It's the voice of someone else's pain that got passed to you like a hand-me-down. And you wore it for years. But now, you get to take it off. You don't have to perform worthiness. You were born with it. You don't have to prove you're lovable. You already are. You don't have to hustle for healing. You just have to stop running from what already lives inside you. The mind doesn't need a master. It needs a listener. When you stop trying to dominate your thoughts and instead begin to meet them, the war softens. You realize the enemy was never your mind. It was the silence that grew between you and the parts of you that have been begging for connection. And maybe, just maybe, the moment you stop trying to fix yourself is the first moment you start to feel whole. There's a moment in every quiet soul where the ache becomes louder than the distractions, where the scrolling doesn't soothe, where the busy doesn't numb, where the pretending simply breaks. And in that moment, something dangerous can happen. You might start to feel not just surface-level sadness, but the deep kind, the kind you've buried under years of being okay for everyone else, the kind that's been curled up in the corners of your body like a cold animal waiting for warmth. Feeling is terrifying when you're used to surviving, because survival teaches you to numb. It teaches you to intellectualize your pain so you never have to touch it, to explain it away, to spiritualize it, to say, it made me stronger. When really, it made you build walls so tall no one could reach the real you anymore. But what if strength isn't in holding it all together? What if real strength is in allowing yourself to fall apart just enough to let something new be born? You've done the self-help, the books, the workshops, the vision boards. You've tried to manifest better, speak better, think better. And still, you wake up sometimes with a weight on your chest you can't explain. That's not failure. That's your soul knocking, saying, stop climbing, start listening. Because the truth is, your mind isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a place to return to. You're not broken, you're burdened by roles you never asked for, by expectations that don't fit your heart, by a world that taught you to abandon yourself in the name of belonging. And so you did. You became what they needed: the golden child, the strong friend, the overthinker, the achiever, the peacemaker. You learned that love was a reward, not a right. That to be chosen, you had to be perfect. That your needs made you needy. That your voice made you difficult. And now, every time you try to rest, you feel guilt. Every time you set a boundary, you feel fear. Every time someone gets too close, you feel the urge to pull away before they can leave first. This is not weakness. This is programming. You didn't choose it. But now, you get to unlearn it. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were told to be. Not who you became to survive, but who you were before the world told you to be small, silent, and pleasing." That self, the one underneath all the layers, is still here. Not gone, just hidden. And she's waiting, not for someone else to find her, but for you. There comes a point when the mirror stops lying, when your reflection no longer shows the version of you that played it safe, but the one who's quietly screaming to be real, to be raw, to be unedited. You've spent so long managing how others see you that you forgot what it feels like to see yourself clearly. You became so good at showing only pieces, little fragments of your truth polished up for approval, that even you started believing that was the whole of you. But underneath, there's a wildness, a longing, a voice you buried the first time someone said, too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. And so you believed them. You turned your rage into politeness, your sadness into jokes, your longing into silence. Because that's what self-sabotage really is. It's not about laziness or failure. It's about grief. The grief of never being seen, never being safe, never being allowed to be fully human without consequence. But that grief, it's sacred. Because when you let yourself feel it, not explain it, not fix it, just feel it, you begin to meet the real you. The version of you who stopped trying to be lovable and just was. The version who remembers how to dance in the dark, laugh too loud, cry in public, and not apologize for needing what she needs. And I know there's a part of you still clinging, still bargaining. If I'm just better, they'll come back. If I keep giving, they'll finally stay. If I fix myself, I'll finally be worthy. But love isn't earned through suffering. That's what trauma taught you, not truth. You don't have to bleed to be chosen. You don't have to shrink to be accepted. You don't have to betray yourself to feel like you belong. Your mind may still whisper otherwise, because it's scared. Because the stories it's been telling have kept you safe, even if that safety came at the cost of your joy. But you're not that child anymore. You're not powerless. You're not voiceless. You're not the product of their projections. You are the one who gets to rewrite the narrative. And maybe that begins with the smallest act, staying. Staying when it gets quiet. Staying when it gets uncomfortable. Staying when your mind says, run, hide, perform. Because each time you stay, you teach your mind that safety is no longer in self-abandonment. It's in presence, in truth, in softness. This is not about mastering your mind like a warrior. It's about reclaiming it like a home. And maybe, just maybe, you're already unlocking the door. Some nights, the ache returns like a tide, quiet but unstoppable. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, and the weight of everything you haven't said, everything you've avoided feeling, begins to rise. You remember conversations where you smiled, nodded, agreed while something inside you curled into itself, unseen. You remember the people who walked away when you finally showed your truth. You remember the softness you used to offer so freely before it became a liability. This is where self-sabotage is born, not in the grand explosions, but in the quiet betrayals, the daily abandonments, the silent, invisible choices to keep the peace by breaking your own heart. You tell yourself you're too much and not enough in the same breath. You laugh too loud and then replay it for hours, convinced you were embarrassing. You say yes before you even hear the question. You apologize for existing, then apologize again for apologizing too much. And everyone else just sees someone who has it together. But you know better. You know how hard it is to hold back the flood every day, how exhausting it is to pretend you're okay when you're barely holding the pieces, how lonely it feels to always be the strong one, the calm one, the one who never falls apart. That's why your healing will never be about becoming better at performing. It will be about letting yourself unravel without guilt, without shame, without explanation. Because you were never meant to carry all of this alone. No one told you this, but I will. You are allowed to fall apart. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to need. You are allowed to say, I don't want to do this anymore. There is no medal for suffering silently. There is no prize for being emotionally bulletproof. There is only the slow death of your authenticity. But here's the truth. The parts of you that sabotage love, success, joy, those parts aren't your enemy. They're your protectors. They are the versions of you that were born in pain, built to survive. They say, don't get too close, because once closeness hurt. They say, don't hope, because once hope shattered you. They say, don't trust, because once trust was the thing that broke you. So of course you sabotage. Of course you pull away. Of course you numb. Of course you stay in things that drain you. It's not because you're broken. It's because you're trying to stay safe with the only tools you were ever given. But now you have new tools. Now you have awareness. Now you have choice. You don't have to kill the protector. You just have to let her rest. Tell her, I know why you did what you did. Thank you. But I'm here now, and I'm safe. This is the reparenting Jung spoke of, not with theory, but with tenderness. You becoming the one who holds yourself exactly how you always needed to be held. There is a soft kind of power in learning to stay with yourself. Not the kind that performs strength, but the kind that trembles and still chooses not to run. You may not see it yet, but every time you notice your patterns, every time you pause before repeating the same silent war you're healing, it doesn't always look like clarity. Sometimes it looks like confusion, like crying for no reason, like realizing the people you've kept chasing never had the capacity to love you the way you needed, and they never will. That realization doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your identity. Because who are you if not the one who earns love? Who are you if not the fixer, the giver, the one who bends? You feel like you're falling apart, but maybe you're just falling through the illusions, the masks, the agreements you made with pain that are no longer yours to carry. Maybe what's collapsing isn't you. It's the scaffolding that was built to keep the real you hidden. You see, when Jung talked about the shadow, he didn't mean evil. He meant the unloved parts, the parts you exiled, the parts they told you were wrong. But you needed your anger. You needed your boundaries. You needed your sadness. You needed your desire. They weren't flaws. They were your compass. And now, after years of turning against them, you feel the pull to bring them home. That's why you cry at things you can't explain. Why you feel grief in spaces that should be joyful. Why you keep revisiting old wounds, not because you're stuck, but because some part of you finally feels safe enough to heal. Healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral, a return, a remembering of who you were before the world asked you to be smaller. And no, it won't always be gentle. Some days, the old voice will return. It will whisper, "Don't trust this peace. It won't last. Don't show your real feelings. They'll leave. Don't dream too big. You'll only be disappointed." But now you'll recognize it. You'll say, "That's not my truth. That's my trauma." And then you'll choose differently. You'll choose to rest instead of overwork. You'll choose to speak instead of swallow your pain. You'll choose to walk away from what wounds you, even if it's all you've ever known. That is the rebellion. That is the revolution. Not in fighting the mind, but in loving yourself too deeply to let it keep running the show from old scripts. You are not here to be ruled by ghosts. You are here to be free. And freedom begins when you stop punishing yourself for wounds that were never yours to carry. There's something sacred about the moment you realize you don't have to live in survival mode anymore. You don't have to analyze every word someone says, hunting for hidden rejection. You don't have to rehearse your emotions until they sound palatable. You don't have to constantly prove your worth through your usefulness, your kindness, your silence. You just have to breathe. Not perform peace, but feel it. Not chase love, but receive it. Not become more, but remember who you were before you forgot. That shift, it's quiet, unremarkable to anyone else. But to you, it feels like resurrection. Because for so long, you didn't know you had permission to stop. To stop fixing everyone. To stop doubting your intuition. To stop mistaking chows for connection. And here's what no one tells you. Healing doesn't always make you more likable. It might make you say no more often. It might make you walk away from things that once defined your identity. It might make you less available to those who only love the version of you that never had needs. But it will make you true. And truth, even when it costs you comfort, will give you something you've never had before. Peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Your mind may resist. It's wired for what's familiar. And pain, if repeated enough, becomes familiar. That's why you keep circling the same patterns. You date the same heartbreak in a different body. You sabotage joy before it can disappoint you. You mistrust calm because you associate it with the storm that always followed. But now you're watching. You're interrupting the autopilot. You're noticing the thoughts that try to pull you back and you're not letting them drive. That's mastery. Not in controlling your mind, but in befriending it. In saying, "I know you're scared, but we're safe now." Can you feel that? The slow softening, the unraveling of armor, the quiet hope blooming beneath the rubble. It's not too late. Not for the relationship you never thought you could have with yourself. Not for the dreams you buried under other people's needs. Not for the voice you silenced just to survive. It's not too late to be new, not polished, not perfect, but present. It's not too late to start again, not as someone else's version of you, but as the one who no longer needs to be chosen, because she's already chosen herself. And when that choice is made, truly made, not just once, but every day, your mind starts to shift. Not because it was conquered, but because it was finally heard. Because someone you finally said, "I will not abandon you again." There's a certain kind of silence that arrives when you stop running from yourself. Not the silence of loneliness, but of landing. It feels strange at first, unfamiliar, like walking into a house you forgot was yours. Everything is covered in dust, and yet it still smells like home. That's what happens when you stop resisting what you feel. You begin to remember. The tears aren't weakness, they're release. The tension in your chest isn't anxiety, it's a signal something needs your attention. The exhaustion isn't laziness, it's the cost of carrying 100 invisible weights just to look like you're fine. You've been trying to survive a storm that ended years ago, but your body didn't know, your mind didn't know, so you kept bracing. You kept preparing for the next betrayal, the next abandonment, the next proof that you are unworthy of rest. But listen, no one is coming to give you permission to stop fighting. You have to give it to yourself. You have to decide that you're done bleeding for love. Done shrinking for comfort. Done bending so far backwards for people who wouldn't lift a finger when you fall. And that decision, It's going to feel like death, because a part of you is dying. The self-sacrificing version, the over-apologizing version, the version who thought suffering was the price of connection. But death isn't the end here. It's the beginning. It's the shedding of skin that never belonged to you. It's the moment the caterpillar dissolves before wings are even a possibility. Jung called it individuation, the becoming of your true self, the collapse of the mask, the unification of the pieces you tried so hard to separate, light and shadow, love and fear, truth and trauma. But let's strip away the language. Let's speak plainly. This is the moment you stop being who you thought you had to be and become who you actually are. And yes, it will be messy. You'll grieve old versions of yourself. You'll question everything. You'll lose people who only knew the watered down you. But you will gain something deeper, a love that starts inside and radiates outward, not the other way around. You won't need to chase anymore. You won't need to beg for crumbs and call them intimacy. You won't need to explain your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You'll simply be, and the right ones will see. Because once you reclaim your mind not as a battleground, but as sacred ground, everything changes. Not overnight, but breath by breath, choice by choice, gentle return after gentle return. You begin to trust your no. You begin to trust your yes. You begin to trust you. And that is everything. Somewhere deep inside, there's a voice you haven't heard in years. It's soft, nearly silent, because every time it tried to speak, someone louder told you it was wrong, that you were wrong, that your truth was too inconvenient to be heard. But if you close your eyes now, if you really listen, you'll hear it again. It doesn't scream, it doesn't push, it waits. And when it speaks, it says things like, "This isn't love. You're tired of pretending. You were made for more than just survival." You feel the tremble in your chest when it speaks, don't you? That's not fear, that's recognition. Because deep down, you've always known the truth. You just needed someone to look you in the eyes and say, "You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not asking for too much. You were just born into a world that taught you to mistrust your own knowing." And that world lives in your mind now. That's why self-sabotage is so clever. It hides in the places you think are protecting you. Like perfectionism, like overthinking, like staying too long in the wrong place because leaving feels like failure. But love isn't supposed to feel like anxiety. Home isn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. And healing isn't supposed to feel like a punishment. You've carried guilt for simply wanting peace. You've felt shame for craving softness. You've convinced yourself that needing is weak. But what if need is holy? What if the parts of you that ache for love, for connection, for tenderness, are the most sacred pieces of your humanity? What if your mind is not a problem to fix, but a map leading you back to what's real? You are not too damaged. You are not too late. You are a mosaic. Every cracked piece, every shattered moment, every scar you were taught to hide is part of the art. There's beauty in your complexity. There's strength in your softness. And there's peace in your honesty. Even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, even if your mind still whispers the old scripts, you are free to speak, to ask, to walk, to stay, to leave, to choose. You are no longer the child waiting for someone to come rescue you. You are the one now. And the most powerful thing you'll ever do is not control your mind. It's to trust it again. Not the fear, but the truth beneath it. The truth that says, I don't have to earn rest. I don't have to explain my boundaries. I don't have to be perfect to be loved. I just have to be. You're almost there. Breathe. You made it. Not to the end, because healing has no finish line, but to a moment most people never reach. The moment you stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What happened to me?" And from that question, everything opened. Because when you stop blaming yourself, you start seeing the truth. You were never broken. You were responding. to pain, to absence, to pressure, to a world that told you your softness was a threat and your feelings were a flaw. You were adapting. And those adaptations, overgiving, overthinking, overworking, they didn't make you weak. They made you survive. But now you're not surviving anymore. Now you're here, breathing, listening, choosing. You've looked at the darkest corners of your mind and stayed. You've faced the thoughts that used to paralyze you and you didn't flinch. That's mastery. Not perfection, not control, but intimacy with yourself. Your mind will still wander. It will still doubt. It will still offer you old stories dressed in new disguises. But you've changed. Now, you notice the pattern before you become it. Now, you pause before you perform. Now, you ask yourself not, what do they want from me? But, what do I need right now? You're rewriting everything. And you don't need anyone's permission. You don't need the world to validate your healing. You don't need the people who hurt you to finally understand. You don't need your pain to disappear to be worthy of joy. You are already whole. Even with the scars, even with the shadows, even with the voice in your head that still sometimes says, you're not enough. Because now, another voice is rising. The voice you buried, the one that speaks in kindness, in clarity, in power that whispers, not shouts. And when it says, you deserve peace, you believe it. When it says, your boundaries matter, you hold them. When it says, you are lovable, even when you're messy, you don't argue. This is how it begins, not with fireworks, but with a quiet return to self-trust, to self-compassion, to a mind that is no longer a battlefield, but a sanctuary. So if no one has told you this today, I will. I'm proud of you. Not for being perfect, but for being real. Not for holding it together, but for letting yourself come undone. Not for healing fast, but for staying in the process. You're not alone. You were never alone. And if this journey has stirred something in you, if it's touched a part of your heart that you thought no one could ever know this, you're exactly where you need to be. Let this be your reminder, your mirror, your moment. And if it moved you, stay with it. Reflect, share, invite someone else into this space of softness. Like, subscribe, but only if it's from a place of resonance, not obligation. Because this isn't about numbers, it's about connection. About reminding each other what it means to come home to ourselves. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until next time, breathe and return gently.